that's life. That's what all the people say. You're riding high in April, shot down in May. But I know I'm gonna change that tune when I'm back on top in June. I said that's life.
And then we just go, and that we have no time to worry about it.
Okay.
Hello. Long time
ya?
no see. It's been at least 3 weeks.
Yeah, man. Yeah, at least 3 weeks. Dude, it was so cool having you here for the class, you and Harry and Ben and Chris and all those guys. That was a blast.
It was a pretty wild experience. It was crazy from the get-go, from taking off on airplanes to the whole trip home. It was a wild ride. So
that's a fun cast of characters too.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
It was there were stories told. You know, it was.
I had a lot of fun just digging through boxes of car audio history. There's a quite the collection there.
And getting rid of a little bit of it because I'm moving my shop right now. So
it's pretty exciting.
Getting rid of a few things. It's great. It'll be great.
All right.
Right. What do you guys want to chat about?
Well, so for those people that didn't read the header on the podcast, we have the legendary Mark Eldridge with us, and I know the part of your history that I've paid attention to and seen, but I have no clue what got you into audio or car audio. Obviously, you're more than just a car audio guy. You're very heavily into music in multiple realms.
It's just music. Mm-hmm. It's music. It's all music, man. That's what it's all about. You know, my dad always had music playing. You know, he had a record player and he'd be playing whatever. I mean, he loved jazz back in the 50s and 60s and, you know, all the 70s popular music. And that grew on me. And then he gave me his record player when he upgraded to a full stereo. And so I took that and, man, I burned up 45s like you wouldn't believe, you know, and my parents got tired of hearing the same thing over and over. And going through the motorcycle phase, motocross and all that, but then getting to the point where I could drive, got a 74 Chevy Blazer in 78, I was 16 years old. And the first thing I did was yank out the AM radio and put in an Underdash 8-track with Pioneer 6x9 dual cones in the back and TSM2 tweeters up on top of the dash. And the dual cones were in boxes, so I could take them out and put them on the tailgate. So when we're playing softball or whatever, we could have music, you know. And it just grew from there. I got to all the way through high school doing my own installs, and then in college doing my own installs. And 1981, the end of 81, Kyle Davis and I were in roommates in College Station, and we needed to get some new speakers. So we went to the local car stereo store in College Station, or actually in Bryan, Texas. And we're looking at speakers and stuff, and across the street in the parking lot, Kmart parking lot, there was a line of cars, and you just heard Flashdance playing over and over and over again. And it was George Reed out there with his SPL meter doing a car audio contest. You know, it was my first exposure to car audio competition. Didn't pick up on it much then. Always had good sounding cars though, and always customizing the vehicle and buying new gear and figuring out how to make it sound better. And you know, that's really kind of the beginning of the advanced part.
So did the transition go from just having a system in your car to employment in the industry, or into competition first, or how did that all?
No, it evolved through wanting my car audio system to sound the best it could. You know, there was no interest in employment in the industry. I was a mechanical engineer, you know, through college, and it was always about putting a top level system in the car, whether it was Nakamichi and ADS, or whether it was Precision Power and NB Court, or whatever it was. You know, JL Audio, I had JL Audio subs in 1990. it was always about making it sound better. And the competition realm really didn't catch me until, I guess it was mid 1990, and I was in C-130 training in Little Rock Air Force Base. And I went to the store and bought a car audio magazine. And I think I showed it to you guys in the class as the one with the audio control RTA on the front. And I started reading that magazine, and I saw cars and music and competition all put together. And I was like, man, this is it. That was the bug that bit me right then to start doing the competition thing. And so then it took on a whole nother level of, hey, I need to learn this stuff. I have to really make it sound correct. Not just good, but it has to be right. And started learning as much as I could, reading the magazines. And then a little bit later on, in the back of one of those magazines was an advertisement for AutoSound 2000 tech briefs. And I thought, I'm a mechanical engineer. I like the technical aspects. I want to learn that kind of stuff. I subscribed and started learning from the tech briefs, and got a bug and called Dave Navoni one day to ask him some questions. And he told me to call Richard because he couldn't answer them. And, I called Richard and started talking to him. And then I went to the AutoSound 2000 seminar in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that was July of 91 or 92. Went out there, met Richard. He helped me tune the system in my 4Runner. And I think I told you guys this story. Classic story. There for 2 days. And the end of the first night, Ellen's in the Grand National demoing music for everybody that wanted to listen to it. Of course, everybody wanted to hear it. And so there's 50, 60 people in line. And she's doing 2, 3, 4-minute demos. And I get in the car with her, and I'm sitting in the right seat. And I said, hey, Ellen, I'm new to this. I want to learn. I just don't want to, I want to hear the car. Can you explain to me what you're listening for and how you evaluate that? And we sat in there for 30 minutes. And she explained as much as she could while all these people were waiting to get in the car. And that was one of the key points for me, really learning how to evaluate car audio systems and what you listen for. And not just car, but audio in general. Then the rest of the class the next day, and then end of the day on Sunday, I finally cornered Richard and said, hey, man, I've got a 4Runner here. I drove to Charlotte from Texas. Can you give it a listen? And I said, I've got, Speakworks horns in this thing, and Veritas, JBL 2118 mid-bass drivers and all this stuff. And he said, yeah. So we get in, it's 110 degrees. And I asked him, do you want to turn down the air conditioner? He's like, no, I want to hear the system. I'm like, okay. So we're sitting there, sweat pouring down the faces. Turn the system on, and he listened about 30 seconds and then turned it down and said, tell me what you got in this car again. I said, man, I've got precision power amplifiers, and I've got the USD horns under the dash. He said, man, you ain't got horns in here. I said, yeah, those are horns under the dash. And he said, those are the worst sounding horns I ever heard in my life. Seriously, that's what he said. And I was devastated. And then for the next hour, he sat there and tuned the system for me. And I was able to drive home with a pretty good sounding system, So that was like the key turning point for me to put me on the path that I've been on ever since. I could have gone a lot of different directions. We all have the same goal in the end, to get to that goal of great sounding car audio. There's a lot of different paths you can take to get there. You still have to hit all the laws of physics, and you can't change that. But those guys put me on the path I was on, and it made sense to me, because I'm an engineer, and that fundamental aspect of looking at everything, it just made sense.
So I'm going to, usually we just kind of run through these stories, but I have questions now.
Sure. Okay.
I feel like there's been a resurgence, or at least an increased interest in compression drivers again. There's been some groups forming online and a lot of guys sharing info and working on stuff. What's your thought, whatever it's been now 30 years later, and I know it's been a while since you've had a car that had compression drivers in it, but what's the take looking
I
back?
kind of look at it like LPs coming back, versus a digital format. It's kind of nostalgic. They've heard about it. They haven't played with it. They don't understand the limitations, what it can do, and the advantages it can give you at the same time. The thing about compression drivers, they're very efficient. That's one thing. But that's not really the end result. That's not what helps you in car audio, because you're so close to all the speakers anyway. Any speaker's going to work. What the compression driver and the horn gives you is dispersion pattern control that you can't get from just a dome tweeter or a mid-range or that kind of thing. It can give you dispersion pattern where it projects more volume to the far side of the car and less to the near side. If you're doing a 2-seat car audio system, which everybody needs to do anyway, my opinion, then that can help you because it equalizes path lengths as well. When you get that compression driver way back up under the dash, the acoustically measured path length difference might be 6 or 7 inches. When you start putting the tweeters up in the A-pillars and you have the mids up in the A-pillars, you might have acoustically measured path length differences of 18 to 20, 24 inches. And when you get up that high, it's very difficult to get a really good sounding 2-seat system. There are signal processors now. There are a lot of things that can do that. You have multi-channel extraction processors that can give you dedicated left, center, and right, and that can help. But even so, if you optimize path lengths and optimize speaker placement and optimize the acoustics in the vehicle, it can get even better. Right now, the big limitation I hear on most cars, well, one thing, they're all 1-seat cars. I mean, there's very few that sound respectably good from both seats. There's like 3. But even with the 1-seat cars, they're still limiting themselves, and understandably so, because they don't want to butcher the car, but speaker placement with the reflective environment and everything they have to do to correct for that, they're not optimizing what they could do. If and this is not me just saying old school is better. If you took Chad Klodner's car from 1994, 95 timeframe, and you put one of these new processors in there with it, he'd slaughter everybody on the circuit. Because he had the speaker placement, he had the enclosures right, he had everything dialed in to sound great from both seats. And then you can take that car, enhance it with the capability we have today, and it would be amazing.
Yeah, how much better do you think some of those? I mean, you obviously use some pretty high tech processing for the time in most of your vehicles, and how much better do you think those cars would be now? Like if you could go back with the 4Runner and be able to tune it with a modern day processor, do you think it's just quicker or better?
Both. Because with the tuning capabilities we have now, I don't want to throw brand names out there, but there are some analyzers out there that can do it fast, and they let you see on the screen what we've been listening for years. The phase relationship. For years, we had to listen and adjust until we thought it was right. Now we can look at it and we know pretty quick it's really close, and then you can dial it in by ear from there if you need to. So the analyzers help. But the signal processors are amazing too, because back then we had analog all-pass filters. Delay, we might have, if we were lucky, 2 milliseconds of delay, and that depends on what frequency it is, because it was a phase delay, if you will. It didn't delay via time increments. We didn't have all-pass filters back then. Everything was very rudimentary. I mean, I had a TEF analyzer, which does a lot of what JL Audio Max and some of the other things do, but you had to really analyze the data, and you had to look at it and point at this and figure out exactly what it was telling you. So we could do some of that stuff, but we didn't have the signal processors to do what they can do today.
And
So,
you've done, I know of at least 2 cars where you've kind of taken that approach of equalizing the path lengths and pushing the drivers really far out. I know the NASCAR and the Legend, you both did, dual mid-base drivers really far forward, really wide. Have you done more projects like that kind of mimic what those horns were doing?
Well, the Forerunner went through, boy, how many different iterations there. I started with the underdash horns, and then I built horns that came out the top of the dash, so that the top of the dash and the windshield were actually an extension of the horn. And I did 3 different horn body designs with that. And of course, the last set, you were there, I gave those horns to Harry. So, Harry Kimura's got the horns, the last set of horns out of the Forerunner, and I hope he can use those in his Cadillac. That would be like the coolest thing ever. But even then, I pulled the horns out and designed the enclosures that went out basically all the way to the headlights, and I had those Tannoy 8-inch coincident drivers that were about halfway.
Yeah.
They were about halfway between the firewall and the headlight. So I was equalizing path lengths there, and I pushed them as far to the left and right as I could. And that worked better than the horns in some respects. It wasn't as good in some respects, but it was better in
give us
in
a
other
little
respects.
more on that? In what ways was it better?
Yeah, it was easier to tune spectrally, because with the horns, with everything I was doing with them to modify the wavefront to get the imaging stability and everything, it really kind of butchered up the sound presentation, from the horns, And I was using those horns down to about 300 hertz. They were really, but it was a 2-inch diaphragm, 1.5-inch throat with a 4-inch diaphragm. Sorry.
Oh, wow.
And very large and long horns, and they're so efficient. I wasn't really driving them hard at all. At max volume, they might have been getting 1 or 2 watts, and that would blow you out the back of the vehicle.
So crazy. And did
so,
the horns with that large a diaphragm in it, did they struggle up high, or?
Yes, yes. That's why I had the additional tweeters up in the A-pillars, those scan tweeters up in the A-pillars. And the horns handled everything up to about 10 or 12K, and then those tweeters picked up from there and just finished off the top end.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but the horns presented the stage and the imaging easier and better, but the tannoys just sounded better, overall, just spectrally. And they did a really good job. With the time I put into designing that system, that was many months of design work to get those in the right place.
And then that kind of became the blueprint.
With everything I had learned.
That kind of became the blueprint when you did the NASCAR, and then just trying to get them out and
really,
wider.
because the tannoys were way out there in these acoustically lined tunnels, if you will. And I don't know if you ever heard the last version of the Forerunner. It was very analytically good. If you listen to my Genelex, and it had everything precision, perfect image placement, stage width, depth, height, all that stuff. But it didn't project as big as it did when I had the horns cooking.
Yeah.
The horns just had that bigger feeling that I like. And when I sold the Forerunner and started building the Cup car, I contacted Doug Winker, because he had done a lot of work in his master's and PhD work at University of Texas, and asked him about the arrays that he had worked with. And what he did wouldn't work for me, so I took it another step just kind of on my own, and I found a little bit of information on doing arrays like that. And I I did not build the cup car to compete in sound quality. I built it as an experiment for me to learn more about making cars sound good. And I wanted a lot of cone area because I wanted to be louder than Stephen Head's vehicles, So that was one of the other goals. But I got the mids in there side by side, the tweeters above and to the outside side by side, and got the voice coils all lined up with the subwoofer, so there's minimal delay differential between them. And just by adjusting delay and EQ and phase between all the speakers, I can steer that dispersion pattern just like I could with the horns, and it sounds better doing it. And it's a presentation that's a bigger soundstage than I've ever heard in any other vehicle, and there may be others bigger, but I haven't heard them. And the images are way out there, and it's deep, and it just sounds more like a real room. That was the whole idea, was to make it big, make it sound like a home audio system as much as you can. And therein lies the rub with some of these cars today. They have a perfect soundstage. It's as wide as the car. It goes a little bit deeper than the windshield, and they sound like they have little Barbie dolls standing on top of the dash singing, and there's nothing wrong with that. When you have the limitations that you're not going to butcher the car, I tell everybody you have to put limitations on what you're going to do before you start the install. And if one of those things is not to butcher the car, you're going to be limited on what you can do with the size of the stage. And that's just a fact of life. Nothing wrong with that. It just is what it is. And with the cup car, that was another conversation Richard Clark and I were having one time. We were having dinner with some friends, and somebody asked, hey, what would be the perfect car to do a sound quality audio system in? And Richard and I both said a NASCAR cup car. And they asked why, and said, well, because it's a shell of a vehicle with a roll cage and no interior that you have to deal with up front. You put the speakers where you want, you build the interior around it, and with those round tubes, sound goes right around them anyway, for the most part, until you get up to higher frequency. And you use things to your advantage. And then I had the opportunity to buy that one, and there we go.
It's one thing from your class that I really enjoyed was I've always been a small 2-channel guy. Like a set of studio monitors near field, I'm happy. I'll take the detail over the big sound or the crazy amount of bass. At home or in any listening environment, I like it in the car too.
Sure.
Listening to so many different systems over the years in both home and car, and being able to go into your facility and just step from a set of small monitors to bigger monitors to pretty big monitor, I'd say like kind of a cross between, and then to a big 2-way. What was your big set? Is a 15 in a compression driver?
Yeah, those are. I built those. It's a JBL 2235 15-inch mid-range driver from years and years ago, and very wide band. They'll play up to 3K if you want them to. Of course, they start to beam at higher frequency, and then it's a set of biradial horns on top of that with an Altec 802D compression driver. And they're crossed over about 1,000 hertz between the two. Super efficient, obviously. And then a set of JL Audio, the 13W7s, in massive, massive ported boxes for the subwoofers. Those boxes are about 4 cubic feet each. And so Jurassic Park will eat your lunch all day. And but those big monitors, I built them. Have you ever heard the Uris? Richard had those big Uri monitors.
No.
He still does. Uri was one of the original large format studio monitor systems. Had a 15-inch mid with a coincident mounted compression driver, and then a 15-inch passive radiator below it. This beautiful sounding speaker. And I wanted to emulate that as much as I could. So I designed these, and they'll play down to about 35 hertz, but I cross them at about 50 and let the 13W7s pick up from there. But I wanted those big ones for that massive presentation. that just overwhelms you. You hear those, you're 15 feet away from them, they're 15 feet apart, and you're like, wow, that almost sounds like a real life-size stage. Depending on the recording, it can. And then the step down from there is the C7s that are set up, which would be comparable to your super high-end home audio system. Set them about 10, 12 feet apart and sit back about that far, and that's what you listen to. And then you step into the Genelecs and the Tannoys from there for the near-field monitors. And I do that in the class so you can hear the presentation of different songs on different types of reference systems, because some songs present better on systems than others. And I've been using Genelecs since 1992, 93. That's still my go-to. If I'm comparing to a car, that's what I do, because I can set them about the same size as a car and then make the car sound like that as much as I can.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's one of those experiences that you don't get. Matt and I always talk about not having a reference for your television until you go into Best Buy and you see them all lined up. And this was very much the same thing as having each of those references and being able to switch back and forth and listen to multiple tracks. It's just an experience that you don't get anywhere.
So real quick, for the people listening who aren't aware of the training program that you have, Mark, this is something that happens.
Right.
This is a demo that you have at your training, and maybe just kind of talk about your training real quick, because I think we're talking about it without people really knowing what we're talking about.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I teach a class, a 2-day seminar, and it's everything I can throw in 2 days about audio, the human hearing system, laws of physics and acoustics, how you design car audio systems, how you tune them. It's everything I can do in 2 days to cram it down everybody's throats and learn some of that stuff. It's based on the AutoSound 2000 seminars that I went to years ago, but those were more background theory, not so much on how do you tune and how do you do other things. And over the past 40 years now, 40 plus years, I've developed a lot of tangible information that works, and I'm not the only one that knows how to do this stuff. There are other people that can make a car sound great. They have different techniques and ideas than I do. I don't care. If you make it sound good, that's what we're after. But the class, the first half of this first day is all listening to the reference systems, listening to music, talking about the music, what it's supposed to sound like, how it was recorded, why it sounds the way it does. And then we get to learning how our human hearing system works. And we talk about how that works and the different frequency ranges and how our hearing responds at different frequencies. If you are trying to tune one thing at high frequency by using a technique you need to use at low frequency, you're not going to get much done. You need to know what to do at different ranges. We talk about acoustics and reflections and speaker placement. Then we build a simulated car in the class with subs, mid-bass, mid-range, and tweeter. And we design and build and tune that vehicle in about 3 hours. And it sounded pretty good for doing it that quick.
And lots of, I know Mark isn't going to like toot his own horn, but there's a lot of really good visual representations of things that you run across consistently in cars that you're just as a feedback loop of doing installs. You've witnessed these things happen multiple times in a car, but to have them presented the way Mark shows them to you, it ties such a good visual to it that it's another level.
Give me an example of that, Gary.
For sure.
Just for like maybe
reflections.
Text listening.
There's a. I don't want to give away Mark's. Mark's.
No, I'm just saying, like an example of something that somebody
want.
would run into, like a general tech all the time, who they see it and they don't know what's happening.
A lot of. I'm saying from a speaker placement and reflection standpoint, like watching in real time and listening in real time as this mock car is built, and the idea that you actually move speaker placement or move boundaries, and you're listening to what's happening and you're watching what happens on the RTA, which is you can't just go move the windshield
Right.
in a car and see what happens. So it's pretty
Right.
cool to just add all that into your kind of mental database of hey, these are things I need to be aware of that you don't. They're usually afterthoughts,
And
in
maybe
most
giving
installs.
the tech more understanding of what's in their control versus what's out of their control. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. And that's the key, is to show them everything. And then we try to give you that huge, massive Snap-on toolbox. And then when you pull a car in the bay, you're probably not going to use every tool you got, but you need to know which tools to grab to do the best you can with the limitations you have on hand. And a lot of the stuff we talk about is, like Gary said, the visual, because you can hear something change, but until you see what it is that's causing that change, you don't know how to correlate that and adapt for it and correct it. So it's I try to do the visual and then have everybody experience it. And we might have to sit there for 30 minutes while everybody sits down in the key seat, so you can really experience all that stuff. And it's the class. I don't have a single PowerPoint slide the whole class. It's all hands-on, ears-on, real-world stuff. It's nothing against PowerPoint, but I don't like it necessarily. But anyway, yeah, the class is fun. It's fun. I got one coming up in December, and it's full. Gary, I'm going to have 26 people, maybe 27 people in this class.
Jeez.
Crazy.
We'll have
Crazy.
to get Matt out there sometime. Maybe I'll come again.
So whole first part of that, you're telling stories, and I'm like, I have no idea. I'm on the outside looking in right now.
Sorry. Sorry, Matt.
No, I'd love to come out.
Hey, I called you. You should have.
You called me like a week prior to you go.
I know, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well,
okay.
I'll keep you guys informed. Anyway, what's next?
So we were up to, you started competing. You got in the magazine, got kind of hooked on that. So you've gone and seen Richard, and he told you that your car sucked.
And started building. Pretty much, yeah. And it did, when he pointed out what it was doing, I was like, yeah, you're right, And at the time I was flying in the Air Force Reserve, so I had a lot of time when I wasn't flying. I worked on the car and learned a lot of stuff there. Learning as much as I could, building. I built for like 2.5 years before I even competed.
Wow.
And finally got to a point where I started going to shows and lost my rear end for the first couple of years. I'd go in thinking, man, I got this licked, I got this handled, and I didn't. And I'd finished 93 finals. I finished, I think, 24th out of 25. In 94 finals, I finished like 22nd out of 25. Started amateur 251 to 500 and then pro 251 to 500. And I knew what I wanted to do in 94, but the system was brand new because I'd just joined the competition group and trying to get everything installed, and it was a rush and trying to get it all going, and it just it was tough. But 95 was my first real year to do well, and that was Chad Clodner and I had become friends, good friends with Doug Winker, and we're all in Dallas, Fort Worth area, so that helped. And that was the first year the expert class really became a competitive class. You had Tim Bailey and Eric Stevens and Mike Minio and me and Chad Clodner and I think 5 or 6 other guys in that class. We all just decided to jump in that expert class and really see what we could do. And that was the first year that I really think I had a pretty good handle on what I was trying to do sound-wise, and at the same time apply that to the score sheet to maximize points on the score sheet. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but there are times when you can sacrifice one area of sound quality to put more points on the score sheet. And so we would do some of that too, and that's a whole nother topic for later on. But 95, I won CMAA and Best of Show at CMAA, which was George Reed's thing. Chad Klodner won SQ, and I won SQ Plus. And yeah, and then 96 came around, and that was CES at 96 is when MTX hired Autosound 2000 to do the Thunder Force.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, that's when Autosound hired me and Jim Adams to come in and manage the Thunder Force and help all the guys with the cars and tune cars and do all that. And so I had to rebuild in 2.5 months the Forerunner with all MTX stuff. And man, that was a thrash. Thank God Robert Abels and Chad Claus and Doug Winkler were around, because they were a huge help there. But 96, man, I won Perry, I won Iasca, I won CMAA, I won USAC. You know, at the Spring Break Nationals, I mean, I won pretty much everything. 96 and 97, Forerunner rolled, man. It was there. You know, I had figured out what they wanted on points and figured out the sound stuff to the point that I could dial it in to maximize the scores. And it sounded really good at the same time. I wasn't sacrificing anything at that point. And so, yeah.
And is that before the top of the dash rebuild, or was that before? Or after?
No, the top of the dash rebuild happened in 94.
Okay.
That was way back. 93, I had the underdash horns. 94, I thought I had learned enough about horns to design and build my own. I hadn't, but and I did that first set, and they worked pretty good. And then that was the right side horn that had that extra hole in it for the SPL for USAC. Remember showing you that? Yeah. That was 95. And then 96, I did the second version of the top of the dash horns. And then 99, I did the last version of the top of the dash horns. And then 2002, I did the tannoys. So, yeah, I moved through a lot of different front stage speaker system designs. I mean, from ground up every time in that 6 or 7 year period. It was a lot of time spent under the dash or inside the dash of that Forerunner. But, yeah, and then on from there, you know. So back to Kicker for about 5 years, and then to JBL for a couple of years, and I've been with JL Audio ever since. So made the rounds.
Yeah. At any point, I guess during your stage and competing, was there anyone that you looked at as kind of like a thorn in your back that you just wanted, like your focus was on them and beating them, or, you know, what made you kind of propel yourself to the next step?
No, I never.
Were you your biggest competition?
The closest, yes, absolutely. My competition was making my system the best it could possibly be, and then if somebody else's system was better than mine, I would learn something from that. You know, the closest, and in an absolutely positive manner, the biggest influence on me initially was Chad Klodner. You know, because he had his Mustang, and it was a minimalist system. He had 2 15s, 2 mids, and 2 tweeters, and you know, Rockford amps, and it was an amazing sounding car. It sounded so good relative to everything else at that time. It blew me away. And I looked at the quality of execution in that car, and I aspired to reach that level. You know, he was one. Mike Daly was an install judge back in the Dallas area at the time. And every time he judged my Forerunner, he would find something wrong. And every time he found something wrong, I would fix it before the next show. And that learning process took my install scores up 30, 40 points, easy, just by way of him judging and me learning from that. And other install judges helped too, but Mike was instrumental in that.
Where did your fabrication skills come from?
I just made them up. You know, I mean, that's seriously, you know, everything I learned fabrication wise, I would look at pictures in the magazines and figure it out. You know, there were no schools. There was no place to go. I didn't work with anybody else to learn that stuff. I had a metalworking background. I learned fiberglass by trial and error. It all came down to me looking at the problem acoustically and figuring out what I needed to do install wise to address that problem. And if it was fiberglass, if it was steel, if it was welding aluminum, it didn't matter what it was. You know, that was, I just took whatever approach I had to get there.
Yeah, because everything I've ever seen that you've touched has been executed at a super high level, and those are not like, you know, the average guy. From what I'm hearing from the story of, I just kind of got into car audio and then just kind of started competing. Usually those levels of fabrication skills don't match up with the rest of your story. Everything's always been executed at super high level and a lot of unique stuff. I mean, everything from, I mean, the amps you were showing me with the water cooling and the snapping in and out and like all of that stuff was just so next level. I mean, you don't see it anywhere.
Well, yeah, you know, and again, Chad Clodner had some of that stuff in his car. He had the liquid-cooled Rockford amps that you could take out, and I just took that idea and took it a whole nother level to step it up. But yeah, it came down to making it sound right, making it work right, making it easy to service. That's good. God, that's key. If you can't service it, don't build it. I've made that mistake more times than I want to count. But yeah, you know, my fabrication skills, and I appreciate your comments on that, but you know, that's all just me learning that stuff and hanging around, watching certain people pull vinyl and watching certain people do different things, and you know, just butchering enough stuff until I got it right to figure out how to do it. So, but you know, I've had a lot of help along the way at the same time. You know, it's not all just me. The machine work on the amplifiers. I don't have a CNC machine. You know, I had to rely on other people to do that. All kinds of help from, you know, Doug Winker and Robert Abels and Chad Claus and all the guys on the Thunder Force and Greg Davis and Gary Biggs. I mean, I can't thank Gary enough for the amount of help he's given me over the years. And working with him is a whole nother story, but that was a hoot those years. But yeah, you know, it all comes down to surrounding yourself with the people that have the knowledge you need to do what you need to do.
So as a kid, did you have an influence that made you who you are as far as trying to, you know, tinker with stuff and figure stuff out and be able to progress and push yourself?
Yeah, you know, kind of. My dad got me started in mechanical stuff and then introduced me to woodworking and that kind of thing. My mom's two brothers were big into mechanical things and motorcycles and kind of got me started there. But, you know, I did the baseball and basketball and football long enough to figure out that's not what I liked. And cars and music and motorcycles and BMX and all the mechanical stuff, you know, that's for me. Yeah, pretty much anything with a motor that goes fast, I'll partake if I can afford it, you know. And the fact that we have car audio and music, I mean, that's just a bonus. Everything I do, I am so blessed that I get to play with music.
So you must be really excited in about 5 years when we're installing better speakers to make our engine sound better.
Oh gosh.
It's all coming full circle now.
Yeah. Well, I know, you know, they're using speakers in cars for different things, to break up waves on the outside of a vehicle, you know, that's going super fast, that kind of thing too. Yeah, you know, the laws of physics and acoustics, we can't violate them, but we can use them to our advantage, and we're learning more every day about how to do that stuff. And I will say this, just real quick, you know, all the cars right now are tuned for one seat, because that's what we have the capability to do. There are processors coming around that are going to allow even people with not great speaker position to have a good sounding 2-seat system.
Yeah, let's just dive into this right now, because obviously I think a lot of listeners are probably familiar with 1-seat versus 2-seat. So give me your biggest pros and cons for both, talking about dynamics of 1-seat versus 2-seat, and everything that we would run into in the modern day era with cars.
Well, let's talk about this first. 1-seat, you're sitting in the car by yourself, listening to an audio system, going, okay, yeah, that sounds really good. I like that. But when you can sit in the car with two people and enjoy it and discuss it and talk about it, it's more like going to a live performance, and this is one thing I absolutely drive home every time I'm talking to somebody about what we do. Go listen to some live music. Go listen to live music. I don't care if it's a high school symphonic performance, if it's Nine Inch Nails, or Scorpions are going to be here, I think, tomorrow night in Tulsa, and how many people are going to that? It's live music. Something Todd Zuckerman said a number of years ago. How many YouTube videos do you absolutely remember and go, dude, that's the coolest video I've ever seen. God, I've got to watch that 50 more times, versus how many live performances do you not remember? Well, I mean, how many live performances you've been to and you remember all of them because of certain aspects of that live performance. Every single live performance you go to, you're going to experience something and you're going to remember it. Watching a video or listening to a car is not the same thing. We went to see Ann Wilson a couple weeks ago, from Heart, with an amazing band here in Tulsa. God, they were great. All the music and the old stuff, none of the new garbage, but all the old stuff. And it was amazing. It sounded great. And I'll remember that for the rest of my life. Go experience live music because you have people around you. It's an emotional thing. It's a friendship thing. It's camaraderie. And I want to see car audio get back to that with the 2-seat.
Not to sidetrack us real quick, but it's just relevant.
I just did. I sidetracked us big time. So.
Have you listened to any of the NPR Tiny Desk stuff on YouTube?
Yeah, some of it, and some of it can. I mean, now I'm not saying you can't get good sound out of that. You've got to have a good audio system or something to reproduce it and experience it. Okay, there absolutely you can get a good recording on YouTube, audio wise. But it's still not the same. You're sitting there looking at a screen, listening to the audio. It's not the same as being at a live concert, going to see Kiss or something.
I think from a demo standpoint, as an installer on the systems that we do that accurately represent a accurate soundstage, I found that's the most impactful tool that I can use, right?
Okay.
Because I can take my phone and I can put it up there. And again, I can have different variants of sources. So I can have like an Astel and Kern player that, we're running with great DACs into the system that play music, and the width and the depth is outstanding. But it doesn't replace the visual.
Right.
And when you have the NPR Tiny Desk, it's a visual of, obviously, for the people listening who aren't familiar, it's a live performance from a band in a very small room. So you can obviously understand the size of the room because you're seeing it. And then you see each band member, right? And it's recorded very well on good mics. And they have mics all across, the recording there. So everything is accurate. If the car is accurate, it's not going to lie, right? When you're sitting there as a client in your car, listening to the main singer, they're going to be there in the center. The guy playing the saxophone will be exactly where you're seeing it on the screen. So it gives a very accurate representation of how your car should be laid out. And I felt like that's the best demo tool and the best reaction that I get when I do a final demo,
Right.
even though I have better sources that they can listen to, but this is the best representation because it's engaged.
Yeah, and for sure, for somebody that doesn't get as deep into this as the three of us do, and all the SQ competitors and stuff. For your everyday listener who gets in the car and they just want it to sound amazing, blow them away with that. But if you
Yeah,
want
we're
to get,
trying to train them to listen to music like we do.
and that's
Trying to point out things to be accurate. And
and
it's a
you
good
may or
stepping
may
stone,
not
I
not
feel like, in
succeed
the
in that.
demo.
You know that
Yeah.
it depends on the person if they want to get into it. You know, my wife doesn't give a hill of beans. I mean, she likes good sound, but she's not going to put the time in to do what we do. It's not her thing, and that's totally fine. But yeah, for somebody that really wants to get into this, that's great. But there's umpteen million really good recordings out there, and as we talk about in the class, the number one most important aspect of having a good sounding car audio system is having a good recording. If you have a good recording up front and everything else is great, you can be amazed. If you have a junk recording up front and everything else is still great, it's still going to sound like that junk recording. So yeah, you have to have a good recording to start with. So,
The junkiness comes through better though.
you can hear all the junk.
And
yeah.
the absolute crazy thing about the NPR Tiny Desk concerts,
Mhm.
a lot of the recordings sound better than the album.
Right.
You know, I know that there's numerous recordings that I've listened to where I've bought the album and I'm like, the album is garbage compared to the recording on Tiny Desk. It really is.
Yeah, and that comes down to mastering
They
and
do an
engineering and
exceptional
all
job.
that stuff. Yeah, because you can get the same recording, and this has happened a number of times, where it sounds amazing. You have one recording, and then you get the same song from the same recording that was mastered differently
Mhm.
and re-engineered, and you're like, what did they do to this thing? You know, so you have to be aware of the recordings you're using as well. So, and the background on each.
Matt, you were just saying, yeah, I heard you mention the Astel and Kern. Did you order the new one yet?
We had talked about this, but I always get the copper unit. So the copper doesn't ship until like January. They haven't released it yet, so I'll have to wait till January. But I do have one on order for a client.
And it's shipping already or
October.
soon?
October. Yeah.
Cool. In case you need 4 DACs inside your portable audio device.
Yeah, there you go. If you need them, you got them. All right, so where were we going back to talking about technology? A 1-seat, 2-seat. Let's get back there for a sec.
Yeah.
With the technology we have today, it's not nearly as difficult to take a system and make it sound great for 1 seat. You know, what the OEMs do with their systems right now is amazing. You can get a system that sounds really good for both seats. It will not have a lot of dynamic capability. A few will, but most don't. And the OEMs will never put a 25-pound subwoofer in a vehicle. It just weighs too much. So you're never going to get real sub bass. But some of the factory systems sound really, really good. And a few of them could enter competition and do pretty well in 2-seat, except for the dynamic capability in some of those areas. But what we're doing now is just absolutely refining to the nth degree that 1-seat system. You know, applying all the delay to the near side and applying phase correction and everything to dial it in for the listener's head position in the driver's seat. And every place else in the car is just a bystander. You know, you get in the right seat of one of those cars and everything's coming out of the right A-pillar, and it's like, man, why am I even in here? You know, so that's but there's some 1-seat cars that are really, really good, you know, and better than anything we had 20 years ago, simply because you can get the signal delay and you can get the phase response and you can get everything perfectly aligned, and you have a very coherent wavefront at the listening position. And that's one thing I want to point out. If you to have an excellent sounding system, you have to have a coherent wavefront where the sound from all of the speakers is arriving at your ears at the same time, in the same phase, with proper frequency response, crossovers, all that stuff has to be right. And you have to minimize the effect of the reflective environment. If you get all that, you can have a stage that's a little wider than the car. It can be 2 or 3 feet deep, and it can be out past the windshield. But if you have a car where you're putting mids on top of the dash, because that's where the factory put them, and this is one real simple thing that we talk about in the class, and this is the demo that Gary's talking about, you're getting the direct sound from the speaker, and then about a half a millisecond later, you're getting the reflected sound off the windshield. Mm-hmm. And those two sounds arriving at your ear a half a millisecond apart gives you comb filtering, and it completely collapses your stage depth because you no longer have a coherent wavefront at your ears. You know, almost every car I've ever heard that has speakers pointed at the dash where you get the direct sound from the speaker and the reflected sound, they're lacking stage depth, every one of them. You know, and that's something that more people need to address. You know, there's nothing a signal processor can do to fix that reflection. You know, you can minimize the effects of it, but you can't get rid of it. It's there, period. So that comes down to speaker location.
So pros and cons of 2-seat versus 1-seat. Would you say, you know, 2-seat has a lot more dynamic range than 1-seat? Or I'm sorry, the opposite.
Yeah,
1-seat has a lot more dynamic range than 2-seat. I'm sorry,
it can
flip-flop that.
It can. If you get a really well-designed 2-seat car, you know, Nathan's car, you know, my car. I mean, some of the cars from years past, they're going to sound really good 2-seat, but it's easier to make a 1-seat car sound that much better because you get everything perfectly aligned for that one spot. So, again, that's the trade-off you have. Do I want to entertain more than just one person, or is one person all that matters? So, you know, and I get it. It's like drag racing. When you get on the drag strip, you're going from one end to the other, and there's one person in the car, and that's it. Whoever gets there first wins.
No need for a passenger seat.
No need for a passenger seat, unless you want to clean up after you're done with them. So but
I mean, let's be honest. So the modern day client spending a lot of money for a good audio system, more times than not, he's going to have a buddy or his wife in the car.
Right.
And listen, I do demos all the time from the passenger seat for the client, and I still get goosebumps in the passenger seat. It still sounds really fucking good in the passenger seat. So
it never sounds as good as the driver's seat.
No. It doesn't. No. But that doesn't matter for, I guess, my point of view. Because, again, the guy's wife is going to be in the passenger seat, and you're giving him the best experience possible in the driver's seat.
I have to challenge you a bit, though, because the majority of my customers that spend a healthy amount on a system spend it because they spend a lot of time in their car, whether they're doing sales or they have a long commute.
100%.
And they do spend the majority of their time by themselves in the car.
100%.
So those are the guys that get the most enjoyment out of them. I mean, there's also a lot of people that just spend money on audio because they want something that cranks and they want to rock out with, going 75 down the freeway with the window down.
It all comes down to your goals for the system. You know, it all comes down to your goals. If you drive the car by yourself all the time, design it for 1-seat. But why not do it for both? Have a system designed that can sound good for 1-seat, and you hit a button and you go to that tuning and it's perfect. And then also have a system designed to sound equally good from both seats, maybe not as good as that single seat system, but that way you can have another person who's an audiophile in the right seat and have them enjoy it too. So
do either of you see a legitimate option to do that without a center channel?
No. Not unless you're going to butcher the car and go back to speaker placement way out, because you have to equalize path links at that point. To do it with anything like speaker placement we have now that's realistic, you got to have a center channel. It's got to be a real center channel. It can't be a little 3-inch speaker. It's got to be a real center channel that can get down into the mid bass and do it the right way.
I guess more and more cars now come with a center channel speaker. That seems to have been a pretty big shift over the last, I'd say, 6 years or so, that the majority of the upper end cars come with a factory center channel speaker.
Sure.
And a lot of vehicles that even with a lower trim level system still have a provision for a speaker for the center channel. I guess the holdback right now is I defer to, hey, it costs more to do a 2-seat system, but if you're going with high-end gear, most of the processors, the higher end processors, have some sort of up mixer.
Yeah, most of them you can sum left plus right, but there's not a lot of up mixers that will extract true center channel, true left, and true right. There are some that will do that, but they don't allow you to go back in and make adjustments to fine tune it. Some of
can't
those
adjust the steering on it.
Some of those I've heard have good left, good right, good center, but then they have a whole left center and a whole right center. It's like sound, but it's not a cohesive stage all the way across the front. There are a couple that will be coming out the next year, 2 years that I think are going to work a lot better. So we're going to have that option. Right now, like in my car, when I'm doing 2-seat, I'm doing left plus right in the center, and then my left and right, I have left in the left and right in the right, but I'm actually adding a little bit of left minus right and a little bit of right minus left to those in different levels. And then, of course, the arrays help me with some different things too. So there's a lot going on there. But, trying to emulate what I want it to sound like.
We think it's hard enough to get most dealers on board with tuning a DSP correctly.
Right.
Wait till we add
well, and that's what I'm saying.
Center channel steering. And
once
what Mark and I were talking about before we got on here. It's just the average dealer. We were having this conversation before you got on here, Gary, that the regular 12-volt dealer has never been more exposed than they are today, because the manufacturers are using DSP to their advantage, right? And when somebody's upgrading a system, they have to make it at least sound better than what was there.
Right.
And the problem is the average installer doesn't understand delays, they don't understand phase, they don't understand level, reflections, any of this. So it's just a big recipe for disaster, and you have these upset clients spending money saying, I spent all this money, my car sounds worse than it did before, they don't know why, and
that's
people have to figure it out.
From a very selfish standpoint here, that fact is driving people to my class. Every class I have, over half the class are retail installers and owners and salespeople that know they have to make their system sound better than the factory, and they don't know how to do it yet. And a lot of this class coming up, maybe not half of it, but a third of it are people that have been to my class before, and they realize they didn't really pick it all up at that point. They want to come back and figure it out again. So no, absolutely. The retailer has to be able to make it sound better than the factory system. And if they can't do that, if they're just making it louder, they're just, it's just not the same.
What would you say the percentage is from installers for salespeople for your class? Because I honestly feel like if you're a salesperson listening, you should be understanding what Mark is saying so you can sell the technology.
Well, it depends on the store, but a lot of stores, the salesperson up front, if they work cohesively with the installer in the back, a lot of times the sales guy sells a system, designs it, is a reference for the installer putting it in, and then when they get done, the sales guy might be the one that tunes it. That's not an uncommon occurrence at all. I
know more and more shops that are headed that direction.
But they they all need to be on the same page, and they need to have the same information and have correct information, whether it's what I'm teaching or what somebody else is teaching. As long as you have a system that makes sense and works and doesn't try to violate the laws of physics, and you can get there. But the problem right now, as a sales rep as well for multiple high-end brands, I would say, well, I'm probably fortunate. I probably got 30 to 40% of my dealers are working towards really doing this the right way. But I look at dealers across the country and talking to other reps, and they're like, man, it's maybe 10% of my dealers actually, try to do this. I mean, I have the ability to help my guys out. I'll go and help them tune cars and show them some of that stuff. But a lot of dealers are kind of in a black hole, and they don't have that knowledge. And some of them don't know they need the knowledge. And unfortunately, a lot of them are resistant to even learning it. That's a big issue, is that some of the guys out there are like, man, we just put in a 1,000-watt amp and a couple subs and swap all the speakers out and turn it on and, set the gains where we think, and it sounds great. It's like, well, it sounds loud, but there aren't enough of them out there. They're getting to be more, though. It's coming. I don't know that we'll ever get to 100%, but it's pretty interesting to look at the different markets that I deal with, and the stores that really know how to do it right are doing all of those high-end systems, and they're selling the DSP, and they're selling the tuning, and they're selling that stuff. And the guys that aren't are doing truck accessories and selling subwoofers and amps, and I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just the fact of life. If that's how they want to do their systems and that's what their customers want, sell it. But man, make it sound good if you can.
So there's the lesson to the listeners at home. If you're shopping for a system and you want something that sounds really good, go to the shop that has an RTA, not the shop that installs light bars.
Well, I've got stores that sell light bars too, and they've got a Max, or they've got a Moscone.
If you have an RTA,
yeah.
If you have an RTA and you install light bars, okay,
yeah,
we'll give you a pass.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the big thing. I don't know how many calls I get all the time where people, their expectations are, hey, I want to make my car sound better for $2,000, and it's like a brand new Mercedes, BMW, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you have to educate them on, okay, this is how the system is set up. This is how the technology works in 2021 or 2022, whatever year it is. And this is why that can't be achieved. And I'm not a shop that's going to take your $2,000 and be like, okay, I have a $2,000 solution for you.
Right.
I'm not going to take your $2,000 because I want you to have a better sounding car.
Right.
If you don't have a better sounding car, you're going to be pissed at me. Right. So this is why I can't do it for that. This is why the technology, you can't just swap speakers and expect a better result, because your system is tuned for the speakers that are already in the car.
Right.
And once you kind of break down the walls and just take a 5-minute education on a lot of these clients, they understand what's needed. And the serious clients will be like, okay, let's talk more. Or obviously the people who thought they would spend $1,000 would be like, okay, maybe it's more than I bargained for. And then you can kind of,
for that $2,000, you might be able to upgrade the subwoofer and do a little DSP on the sub to blend it in with the rest of the system. But that's about it. The way to look at it and explain it for anybody listening out there, the OEMs spend millions of dollars to design an audio system for a car, because they want to use 50-cent speakers and $5 chip amps and make it sound amazing for 90% of the people that will ever get in that car. That's what they care about. They don't care about us in the aftermarket. We're not even a tick on their what. That other 5 to 10% is where the people we're going to work with, though, because they're going to want better. And because they spent so much money making that inexpensive stuff sound good, we have to have the knowledge to make it sound better. And I mean, you're talking about guys doing that, Floyd Toole and Sean Olive, and you heard of Teal Small Parameters. Those guys work in that industry, and Don Keel and a bunch of names I could rattle off here that design these systems to sound amazing, and we have to do it better. And a lot of times that comes down to not replacing everything, keep what they did in the factory system, take the speakers out, do some adaptation to go with new speakers in the same locations, and use what they've already given you with better speakers. And if it's a system that already sounds really good, do that. Now, if it's a disaster of an OEM system, sure, you're going to have to start from scratch. But man, I would think 8 out of 10 times, replace the factory speakers, more power, better speakers, adapt what they're doing to make it sound better, and roll with that. But even then, you're talking, what, 5, 6, 7 grand a lot of times?
Yeah, we did a series of episodes in the first season, Mark, where we're gonna have to adjust this for inflation,
right?
But we basically, with a few different people, sat down and designed the most basic upgrades that you could do for $3,500 installed.
And that's tough. That's very tough.
And I would say that today that's probably $4,500 or $5,000 with inflation.
Yeah.
But the bare minimum of everybody unanimously said we need DSP amplifier in this car.
Yep.
Right? Like we need to start with some cojones and some tuning capability, and we can cheap out and put a prefab box if we have to, but we want to get a DSP amp in the car and then get the best set of front speakers in the car we can. And everybody, it was pretty much unanimous the whole way through. It was a really cool exercise, and kind of, I mean, we went through and picked models and everything of here's exactly what each person would do. It's a really cool little experiment.
Yeah.
Reminds me of, remember back in the day, I think it was Car Sound would have like the car of the month, and they would have different shops submit their quote for that car.
Right.
Kind of that mentality. Right. It was a cool thing back in the day.
No, I'm with you there. But and that's, on a retail level, that's what you got to do. You got to make the car sound better. That's the whole key. Well, okay, now you can include this because this is something that happens more often than I like to think it does right now. Is that somebody with the tuning capabilities we have, with the analyzers we have, you can see visually on the screen what we've been listening for so many years. And unfortunately, it's gotten to the point where you have some people who can use computers and they can see the screen and they say, okay, all the phases lined up and delay set and all that. And then they get done and go, okay, that's as good as it's ever going to sound. And they never even get in the car and listen to it. There's that aspect of it. It's that last, well, okay, let me pull a little background on this. I've been tuning cars for 40 some odd years now. And I've used every analyzer I can think of. And finally got to a point where I have been able to correlate what I hear with how to make the corrections. So, I can do time and I can do phase by ear, but it takes a long time to do because you can't see it. You have to listen to it and get everything to line up as best you can. And let's say it would take me 8 hours to tune a vehicle, start to finish, to get a good initial tune. That's still not the end tune. Doing it by ear. When JL Audio came out with the Max, and they sent me one of the beta units, and I got on a conference call with them for about 3 hours. And fortunately, I had a background in everything they were doing anyway, so it was more the processes on how to correlate what I was hearing and what I needed to adjust and see it on the screen and how to push the buttons. After that meeting, the next day, I retuned my reference systems in about, from start to finish in about an hour and a half, what had taken me 20 or 25 hours to do before by ear. And same thing in the car. With what we can see now, we can get 85% of the way home just with the analyzer. You got to listen first to make sure everything's situated like you want it, and then you get the analyzer going, get it tuned, and then you get back in for that last 15 or 20% by ear. But that last 15 or 20% is where you really make your money. And if you don't have the reference and you don't have the ability to listen to something and go, and the most common issue I hear is a center image that wanders because they've adjusted it by the analyzer, but they've never really gone in and listened to frequency dependent shifting of the center image or image stability on the left and right side. Just because the analyzer says the phase is perfect, it's measuring that at the microphones. Reflections in your ears can say otherwise. So you still have to have that ability to correlate. This is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm hearing. How do I put those together and make it better? So that's and that's been the most common issue I've heard. Is a lot of times I'll hear a car, and some of the guys coming to the class have said, yes, I can adjust using the analyzer, but I don't know what to do after that. And that's one of the key factors. And that's not something you learn in 2 hours. That's something that takes time. You have to get the focus and direction to learn how to learn it, and then it takes time to learn how to do it.
And you have to have a reference.
And you have to have a reference.
True,
absolutely
repetitive reference.
And your reference damn well better not be a car. Okay?
It can't be the last car that you listen to.
No,
because that is car audio in a nutshell.
There is no car audio system ever built that I would consider a reference. There are some that sound better than others, but there's no car audio system in the world that I would consider a reference. That's just my, 3 cents worth.
The other thing, touching on the tuning by RTA only and staring at a screen to make every single adjustment, there's so many issues with reflections and comb filtering and microphone position, right? Like I've experimented plenty of times with a single mic, going back and forth between waving a mic and multiple mic positions and averaging, and these insane peaks, like you can move the microphone an inch and end up with a 4 dB peak somewhere, or you took it out on one tune and back and forth. So I was working on a truck today with the Max, and I started moving the microphone array, which was a whole new level of interesting, because I'm like, oh, hey, 5 mics and averaging, and this is going to be great. And I'm like, wait a second, I need to see this. And I started moving the mic array, and it's still, even with the mic array, it's still pretty crazy to see how much moving. You have to move it further now to get the kind of swings, but it's still there. It's still, it's not end all be all by getting a target.
Well, and how you set up the mic array too can make a difference on how well it averages for the listener. And if I'm setting up a system in a car that's designed for competition, and where the listener's head's going to be within a certain area, that's easier to tune than tuning a system that might be driven by the husband one day and the wife the next day, and their heads are in 2 totally different spots. There's a lot of discussion about how to set up a mic array. I have my own opinions, and we discuss them in the class, and we'll leave it at that. I mean, I learned from the industry guys that are doing this stuff, but the mic array, case in point, moving that mic a quarter of an inch, RTA competition. Okay, the lamest part of competition we do, but they give you points for RTA scores. And I would always set my microphone in exactly the same spot every single time. And I had a drop down a string that I held up against the headliner with a washer on the bottom of it. And I always told the judge, put the microphone tip in the washer. That way I knew it was in exactly the same spot every single time. And other competitors say, you can't do that. You can't do that. I'm like, read the rules. You just tell the judge where you want the mic, and that's where I want the mic. But you move that mic a quarter of an inch, and the whole RTA curve changes.
Everything's off.
Yeah, because that microphone's a core is the size of a pea versus your head, which is 6 or 7 inches wide with 2 ears, and the RTA cannot tell what a reflection is relative to a direct sound. Our ears can. Analyzers are great. You got to use your ears too.
And you can learn this too by going to Mark's class.
Well, you can learn it a lot of places. I will get you started on it if you want to do it. But anyway, so what else?
I have a couple questions that kind of piggyback on what we're talking about.
Okay.
What is the biggest misconception with speaker placement?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any one misconception.
The one thing that you see people talk about most that is irrelevant.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about the different frequency ranges and how we perceive aspects within those frequency ranges. Somebody who says that path length difference is important at high frequency, or somebody who says that the particular angle of a mid-bass driver makes a difference. Those two things are totally incorrect. Because at high frequency, above about 2K or so, and a wavelength at 2,000 hertz.
Me and Gary got into this on one episode.
Yeah. Above
and I was on your side on this one.
Yeah, above 2K, 2K wavelength is about 6 inches. Your head's about 6 inches wide. So once you get above that, the shadowing effect of your head between the two ears is the dominant factor, and it becomes how loud it is in this ear relative to the other ear.
Yeah, it's level.
Okay.
Yeah, not
when
time.
you're getting down in the mid-bass range, below 400 hertz or so, the wavelengths are so long that you become much less sensitive to that shadowing effect. So how loud it is left or right makes almost no difference at all.
Right.
But the arrival time difference between the left and right is huge. That's why you have to have your mid-bass drivers in polarity. And you have to have, if you're doing single seat, you want to have the mid-bass phase throughout the range as close as you can between the two speakers. Now, between 400 and 2K, it transitions from phase to intensity, and you have to worry about both, which is why that's the most difficult range in a car to tune. The mid-range, the upper, upper mid-bass, lower mid-range, all through there. But that's a fact of life and human physiology.
Gary, I just want to say that me and Mark did not talk prior to that question.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the biggest misconception about speaker? What question did I just ask you about speaker placement? Or
yeah, speaker placement.
So what's the biggest misconception about tuning on a car? As far as just general tuning, what do you see all the time that people talk about that really is irrelevant?
That's irrelevant?
I would say to what you see online, what you see the DIYers say. There's well, I don't know that it's any one thing, but I don't get on the forums to do discussions anymore, because somebody may have tried something one time and it worked for them, so they start broadcasting, this is how it is. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily true. It may work 1 out of 30 times, but you have to understand all of the underlying factors as to why something works the way it does. And if you get to the basic fundamentals of how the human hearing system works and how we respond to sound, and then you correlate that with the knowledge of what reflections do and speaker placement and arrival time and path length differences and all of that stuff, it doesn't take long to get into a pocket that you're working in a pretty good realm where you can make improvements and go, okay, now I understand why making this change doesn't help here, but it helps this other part. Okay. Or if you make one change to improve one area and it messes up
another area, you can go, oh, now I understand why. But as far as misconceptions, I just try to avoid those conversations altogether and just stay on what really works, you know?
Well, is there any one thing that you see as a commonality that a lot of people that come to your class do
Yes.
that is completely wrong?
Well, again, I'm not going to put it in terms of completely wrong, but the most common negative installation factor I see is putting speakers on top of the dash pointed at the windshield. You know, because that's where the factory had the mid-range drivers or something.
Right.
And I understand you don't have 50 hours to rebuild the top of the dash, and you have airbags and you have everything else. Or, you know, putting a big mid-range up in the A pillar. By doing that, now you're causing reflections off the side glass and the windshield and the top of the dash in that critical mid-range area. You can count on your stage depth being collapsed. You know, that's okay. Maybe I can say the one most common area that I hear lacking in more car audio systems is stage depth, hands down, and that is because of the non-coherent wavefront at the listener's ears, and it's not caused now necessarily by arrival time of the direct sound from the speakers, because with the analyzers we have, we can get that really nice. It's caused by the reflective environment causing issues in the phase response and decorrelating that coherent wavefront, and it collapses the stage depth. You know, it just does. And Angie, remember Angie was at class here with her car? Okay. Jeff Smith had done a beautiful job, beautiful install. But she had the mids on top of the dash, and the tweeters and the A pillars and the mid bass down in the doors and stuff. And you know, she asked before, said, "What do you think of the system?" I hadn't even heard it, and I said, "Well, I have some ideas what I'm going to hear, and we're going to have some limitations on what we can do to correct it." And then I put Jeffrey and Scott on it to tune it, and they did everything with the analyzer, and then we started listening by ear. And with Angie in the car, we went to before and after. And I showed her, this is what you had before. Now here's what you have after. She says, wow, it sounds a little bigger, but it's wider and higher, but it still doesn't extend out front. And I said, that's because you have the mid-ranges on top of the dash pointed at the windshield. And if you can't change that, you're never going to get that depth.
So how would you change that in her scenario? If you're the installer, there's no budget. How would you change that?
Well, there's no budget. You can't change it.
No.
Hold on.
No budget or no budget limitation.
No limitation.
That's a huge.
Yeah. I would say to where you still want it to be a functional looking car.
Right. There are techniques. I can't really explain them here, but you have to modify.
Without giving away your proprietary.
No, you have to do enough modification that you are getting the direct sound from the mid-range that is at a higher level to the point where the reflection does not negatively affect the direct sound, the direct path. Okay, so you might be able to sink the mid-range down into the dash and use some absorptive materials in a couple of different spots and direct that reflection to an area where it's not going to cause a problem. There's a number of factors that affect it. You know, if you can move the mid-range elsewhere, that can work too. You know, there's it's just hard to say without looking at a particular vehicle, and sometimes it's not possible because just moving it up onto the A pillars may or may not make it a whole lot better, because then you get a big reflection off the side window, which can collapse everything on the near side. So the near side sounds shallow, but the far side is much deeper. So now you end up with this real shallow stage on the close side and a big stage on the opposite side. So
now would you say it being on the A pillar, depending on the car, that you can kind of use that to your advantage to get a wider stage with the reflection bouncing off the side glass?
Well, okay, now we have to look at, with that question, how the human hearing system responds to different frequency ranges and
Right.
we're sensitized to. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
stage depth you get from upper bass, mid bass, lower mid range, that coherent arrival time. Stage width is more a combination of mid range and high frequency content, and more so determined by high frequency content. Same thing for stage height. It's more determined by high frequency content than mid bass. That being said, if you have a mid bass driver that's just banging around down low, it's going to draw your attention down there regardless. So there's a lot of factors you have to address. But yeah, I mean, the tweeters up in the A pillars for sure, no problem. The mid range is going over there. Enclosure size may be an issue. The reflective environment, because the wavelengths are long enough that even absorptive material is not going to absorb much around 400 or 500 hertz. You're at the mercy of the reflective environment up there. So, it just depends. Again, how much damage do you want to do to the car, and what's most important to you? Big subject, I know.
After this last sentence, you opened up your mouth like you were about to say a sentence, so I just paused.
I was going to bring up how long is it until we have big directivity horns on our A pillars that make them look even larger than they are already.
Yeah. Well, there have been a number of cars that have tried to use a horn in that way, where they're basically pointed right at you. And from experience, that almost never works. You don't want to be able to look down the throat of a horn, because then it just beams and you can't get rid of that. Every horn system I've ever heard that worked well was a diffraction type horn, where the sound projects out from the horn, and instead of going straight at your ears, it has to diffract up around the edge of the horn. Maybe it's coming up from under the dash or coming over the top of the dash. And it just gives you a more controlled dispersion pattern for the way a horn works. I mean, kind of hard to get too deep into that here. But the cars I've heard that had horns pointed right at the listener's ears, I've never heard one that really did a good job. So just for you horn fanatics out there that want to try that.
Well, let me ask you this. What's the best factory audio system you've ever heard?
Oh, there's some good
the
ones
most
out there
impressed you've
now.
been by a factory audio system.
Okay, the most impressed I have been, 1997, I was working in North Carolina. I was working for Autosound 2000 with Richard. And Polk Audio came to us and said, hey, we'd like you guys to help us design an audio system in the Cadillac Seville, the STS at the time, that will take on the Bose 4.0 system. And so we want to present to Cadillac a better sounding system than what Bose 4.0 was. So we thought, wow, that sounds like a cool project. That sounds great. Let's try that. And they gave us a budget, I think, of $250,000 or something. Okay, so it sounds like a lot of money, right? Richard and I went to the Cadillac dealership and took all our reference music and hopped in the current version of that system. And we listened from both seats, and each of us from the driver's seat. And after about 30 minutes, we're like, it is not even possible for $250,000 to make a system sound better than that Cadillac system did. I mean, the Bose 4.0 system, after that, Richard and I went to David Clark's class, because he's in Detroit and teaches how to analyze systems, and that 4.0 is a perfect score on David Clark's judging. And his format, Iasca takes 30 minutes a car maybe. His format takes like 6 hours per car. It's a much more detailed, much more systematic approach towards analyzing it. And Bose had taken his analysis system and spent $1 gazillion making that system sound as good as it did. And Richard had to tell Polk, you got to have $5-6 million just to get started if you really want to do this, because we got to hire the guys they used, because we can hear it, but we don't know how to do what they do.
Wow.
So that system at the time, if it had been a little more dynamic and had a better subwoofer, it could have won all of the amateur classes and most of the pro classes. It probably would not have won the expert class or the upper level pro classes, but it could have won everything else at finals for, at that time, $1,500, $2,000, on sound quality. Now, since installation was a big part of the judging back then, it wouldn't have won, but the sound quality part it could have. So yeah, that was a very impressive system.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Matt, I have an idea for a new YouTube channel. We'll just go rent cars and then run them through like Mecca events and score them, and then do videos and post the actual like Mecca score of each. We might need to cut that out. I might actually get on that.
No, you're brilliant. We might actually make more money than we do doing our job.
There you go. All right, so I'm keeping that one. We'll cut that out.
There you go.
If you see me rolling into a Mecca contest with new Hyundai or something.
Yeah. Well, and I have seen some factory systems roll through. Lexus had a good sounding system back in the mid 2000s, 05, 6, 7 time frame, and he'd go to USAC shows and IASCA shows and finish first or second most of the time. So it doesn't have to be. You don't have to spend a ton of money, but we want them to spend a lot of money. That's the key.
What's the last install you did?
Last full blown install I did. Well, I mean, still working on my car, but for somebody else, it was Vollmer's Acura, the Legend. That was man, that was such a cool deal. Because when I was getting started in 91, 92, 93, really just getting started reading in the magazines, the cars that impressed me most at that time were the Grand National, Speakerworks Grand National that Richard bought and updated, did some stuff. Todd Matsubara's car and Harry Kimura's car. And Harry's car just fascinated me because it was the horns with the mid bass in the back and the subs in the back, the Rain EQs, which I was using at the time, and the USD horns and all that stuff. And at 93 finals, it was in Tulsa, and I'd been through the lanes, and Harry had already been through the lanes, and I had my USD horns that I had in the 4Runner, so I wanted to go talk to Eric Holdaway, and he was getting in and out of Harry's car, retuning it, and I introduced myself because I'd never met him before. I said, "Hey, Eric, I'm Mark Eldridge." He said, we talked for a few minutes. He said, "Hey, hop in the right seat of the car." I was like, "Ooh, I get to listen to Harry's car." Because they didn't let anybody listen to the car back then. Nobody. They judged, closed it up, and nobody ever listened to it. So I got in the right seat, and he's listening and trying to retune. Of course, judging had already been done. But he was asking me what I heard, and I told him what I heard. And we discussed it for a little bit. And then I got out, and Harry's trunk was open. And on the side, the left side, were his Rain EQs. Okay? And I had my camera, so I went, snap, took a picture, and this is when I was kind of learning this stuff, right? And I thought, man, those are the magic settings. And I went and applied all those settings to the 4Runner system, and it sounded like I'm not even going to say what it sounded like, but it was a disaster, So just because one person sets something one way doesn't mean that's going to sound right. But anyway, so his car was an inspiration, and here we come. About 22, 23 years later, 24 years later, the car had been sold. Ben Vollmer had bought it. He had some other guys doing the install and they never finished it up. So he contacted me and said, "Hey, do you want to rebuild the system in the Acura?" And I was like, "No, I don't want to ever change that system from what it was." He said, "No, that's already been butchered. Everything from Speakerworks has been pulled out. It's a blank slate." And I said, "Yes, I want to build that system." And so Ben brought me the car, and that was just surreal. It was one of those full circle things to build a system in one of the cars that inspired me to go the direction I did, you know, and to build it and make it sound good. And Ben took it and, you know, won a bunch of shows that first year. He didn't compete with it after that for various reasons. But, and then to tack onto that, the class you came to a few weeks ago, Harry was there. And so that was another total full circle thing for me. For me,
and Ben,
Ben was there. Well, Ben came because Harry was there, so you know that's why. But you know, to have Harry there that I had learned from, and for him to learn from me, you know, just the coolest thing. And to give him those 4 bolts. I mean, the only parts of the car I had left were those 4 trunk bolts from the Acura. So I gave them to
still have the red
paint on them. So I gave those to Harry. That was cool. But yeah, you know, cool. you gain inspiration from wherever you can.
And then didn't you say you had worked on the Buick at some point too?
Yeah, when I was working for Richard out in North Carolina, you know, he had put the Kenwood amplifiers in there in 98. Was it 98? Yeah, 98. No, it's actually before that. It was 95, 96. And he had put the Kenwood amps in there. Kenwood had paid him to do that because he was teaching the Exelon trainings and they wanted the Kenwood amps in it. And then I was working out there and Pioneer was going to hire us to redo the audio system in the Grand National. So I was tasked with taking it apart and documenting every single piece that was taken out, putting it in a bag, documenting where it was, what it was, and putting it on the shelf. Wow. And so I got it all apart. Pioneer didn't have the money we needed to be able to do that system the right way. So it got mothballed, and I don't even know where that car stands right now. I think it's still taken apart. It's got nothing in it right now. It's just a shell of a Grand National with that fancy paint job on the outside. So, but they're
so 80s.
Yeah, it was, you know, and there were things in that car that, you know, you hear rumors about, and man, none of the rumors are right. You know, people talking that crap don't know what they're talking about. So, you know,
were those giant horns really in there?
Yes, they were in there.
Man, that picture of him holding
the
horn.
Okay, now that's
like a
the horn in that picture was the original horn that Speakerworks had, and I think I've got this right. That was the original horn Speakerworks had in there with that big monster driver on it. But Richard had redesigned the horn different to use those drivers. With that horn in that picture, it would not have fit in the dash with that.
Right, it'd go through the firewall.
Go through the top of the dash. You know, yeah.
Oh wow.
So there, you know, that was one thing. But you know, he had a servo controller in there on the subwoofers. You know, he was one of the first people to really do a servo controller the right way. Man, that car could absolutely slay you with volume and sound great while it was doing it. You know, it just got loud.
Did those cars, like Harry's car and the Buick with the rear mid basses, did they just run the horn, or were they also running a mid-range driver up front, or was that secret sauce that nobody talked about?
Harry's car only used the mid bass in the back, and Todd Matsuber's car in the back, and Richard, when he got it, had those 12s in the back sides. And I'm not sure I'm at liberty to say what he did after that. So,
all right.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah, but he had some different ways of pulling the stage up front. And again, like I said earlier, with those big compression drivers and a big horn being so efficient, you can cross them over really, really low. You know, you're not limited to 1K. I mean, I could have crossed mine over down below 200 hertz easy, but it sounded better crossed over at 300 to 400. You know, so
yeah, that's one of those things. Having rear mid bass is one of those things to where it just doesn't work in your head. Like you think of all those times trying to anchor a sub in the front of the car, right, and trying to get that phase relationship right between the front mid bass drivers and a sub, and then let's just move them to the back, and it just sounds like a terrible idea.
And it is, and from a standpoint now, because more people have a better understanding of overall spectral response. And part of the trade-off back then to get a better score, because there were more points on the score sheet for imaging than there were for tonal balance. So they were willing to sacrifice a little bit of mid-range or mid-bass tonal balance in order to get a solid front stage. And that's one of the things we did on 2-seat cars back then too, was we would pull down 200 to 400 hertz a little bit, because the mid-bass tend to pull to the left and right. You couldn't stop that because it's the arrival time thing. So you turn that down and let the upper frequencies cover that up a little bit so you get the anchor. You're just lacking a little bit of that lower vocal impact, if you will. But we don't have to do that anymore. So that's one of the cool things about new technology. We don't necessarily have to sacrifice spectral response to get the image placement. But amazing cars back then, man, for what they had to use. Yeah, and that's one aspect that I look at now. The understanding competitors had back then of how the human hearing system worked and how all that interacted, knowing they didn't have the processing power to correct some of that, to make those cars sound as good as they did. If Holly Mungle and Richard Clark and Harry Kimura and all those guys were competing now with the knowledge they had back then, with the stuff we have now, it'd be a pretty interesting ball game in the competition lanes.
Can you imagine what the Egyptians would do with the technology we have today?
Oh my God. Yeah.
I mean,
sound
seriously.
Inside those pyramids would be unbelievable. Yeah.
So what do you have in your daily driver? Probably stock, right? Like the rest of us?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, seriously, my Suburban, because I've got my cup car and I've got my reference systems, and the Suburban I've got,
I got fun in her.
Well, I got it from my wife a while back, thinking, okay, she'd driven it for a number of years, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to drive it a year or two. And this is just before COVID. And then COVID hit, and as a rep, I'm at the bottom of the list to get new product. So I couldn't get new product even if I wanted it, because any product they had went to a dealer to sell it to a customer, So it's been a stock system. I mean, at the point now where I can get the product, but I'm looking at how much longer I'm going to have this truck, So, but it's one of the Bose systems in a Suburban, 2014 Suburban. And for the 5 miles from here to work, it's okay, because once I get there, I've got all the audio I can ever dream of.
Yeah, you get to play later.
Yeah, and I hate to be the rep that doesn't upgrade his factory system, but right now I'm the rep that hasn't upgraded his factory system.
I'm pretty sure you're one of the few reps that can get a pass on that.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but it is what it is. So, yeah.
I'm just saying, I never had, a Mark Eldridge as a sales rep for any of the brands.
I got you. Yeah.
Work with.
Yeah. Well,
that'd be pretty special, huh?
I don't know. Like, it's funny. I think now, like the team of guys that have started installing and competing and that kind of stuff, between you, the Greg Cobbses, the Gary Biggs, there's a whole bunch of extremely talented former world champions that just walk into, I'm sure some stack 'em high, watch 'em fly, BS stereo shops, and the people inside probably have no clue the history or the amount of knowledge that's floating around between your ears.
None whatsoever.
And
they don't care.
Get it.
It's not for them. But there's more of those than anything else. But I'll tell you what, sometimes it's really cool to walk into a dealer where somebody there has learned a little bit about the history of the industry, and they start asking questions, and they want to learn, why are we where we're at? What is it that got us to this point in the industry? And
welcome to the old-fashioned podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we're doing.
I know.
That's what we do. It's our specialty.
That's literally what we've given to the industry.
And that's so key. It's so key, because we all are standing on the shoulders of giants. Every one of us. Yeah. None of us would be here if it weren't for the Dan Jobins and the Richard Clarks and the Dave Navonis and the Holly Mungals and the, you know, you could name 50 different names from back in the day, and then you can go back to the guys that they learned from. And the guys they learned from weren't in car audio necessarily, but they learned from guys in pro audio and home audio that they took that information and put it in cars for the first time. So, you know.
We're going to have to go back and actually do some documentation. What was the first audio system ever in a vehicle? What was the first aftermarket installation? Like, who was the first guy that grabbed a home speaker and put it in his backseat?
Gary, you got the one person to do the timeline for you for the demo tracks. We need to have somebody do a time, like one of the timeline graphs of car audio based on everything that's been told thus far.
Wow, that would be an exercise. That would be interesting to see, you know.
Because we have a lot of stories. We have a lot of full stories.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of our stories only go back so far, you know, back to into the 70s. Mm-hmm. There's really not a lot of discussion prior to that. You know, there were car radios, but I don't think there was a whole lot of concern about audiophile quality back then. But there may have been in the 50s or something. Who knows? You know? Yeah. There may have been some guys going, man, this just doesn't sound right. How do I make it better? That would be interesting to know.
I always think of I see the old ads when they actually had car record players.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like,
Dan Jobin.
What a crazy time.
When I was working at Kicker. Dan Jobin, who ran the tech department when I started working there, he'd been at Kicker for forever. Forgotten more than most of us will ever know. But he collected vintage car audio gear, and he had a record player that went on the rear deck of a vehicle. And that's yeah. So, you know, and he had, I don't know, 50,000  8-track tapes, and he had all kinds of stuff. But he actually had a car record player.
So since you brought it up, Matt, it is time we give Patrick Fitzwater his due, which is Patrick.
Oh, he's the guy that got all the demo tracks.
He's the guy that not all, most.
Okay.
He still has a little work to do, but he got most of them. Thank you, Patrick. We will get we have a playlist on Spotify, Mark, that ask each guest for their favorite demo track or two. So, what a segue.
Yeah.
There you go.
You just get done tuning a system. What's the first thing you put on?
Money for nothing. Dire Straits, Money for Nothing.
Track.
You know,
Yep.
I mean, if I'm looking for, and it depends on the system, but if I'm looking for that wow factor that I can just sit back and go, oh my God, this sounds freaking amazing. You know, that has dynamic impact. It's full. There's no missing parts, and it just rocks. You know.
And is there anything specifically that you're listening to in that track?
No, I'm listening for that track. I'm listening for that track to get away from all the critical listening tracks I've listened to for the past 8 hours. You know, I'm listening to that track to cleanse my palate and let me go, yeah, okay, this thing jams. After listening to that, then I will go back to some other tracks. If I'm listening for imaging and staging, or if I'm listening, you know, depending on what I'm listening for. And what the system was designed to do. There's a number of things. Rebecca Pigeon, Auld Lang Syne, you know, for an overall imaging, staging, tonal balance, pretty easygoing track, easy to determine frequency response for each instrument. They're all placed really well on the stage. It's great. You know, Patricia Barber has a number of tracks. That I love. There's you know, a lot of stuff from Sheffield, a lot of stuff from Chesky. You know, I mean, and Gary's been to my class. I've got on my iPad full WAV files of I think 134 different tracks, and I know each one of them intimately for different reasons. And at any point in time, you know, during the class, we'll just go through and, hey, let's listen to this one. What's unique about this track? Why do you listen to this one? Okay, let's go to this other one. Some are big band, on a huge stage. Some are tiny little maple shade things inside a 15 by 15 by 12 foot stucco wall room where they're all recording at the same time. And some are just somebody talking. One of my favorite tracks for tuning is on the Sheffield disc. It's CD 103, and it's Howie counting from 1 to 25, and it's just a single person counting from 1 to 25, and it's a great track for adjusting center image stability and frequency response.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
The other cool thing about being at Mark's is that there are a decent amount of drums around, and like I'm sitting there with my head down, and next thing I know, Mark's beating a drum as hard as he can about 8 inches from my head, scaring the crap out of me. But,
I want people to understand.
Well, that's what
you get in a
like.
recording versus what you hear live, and and I said earlier, go listen to live music because that's so important.
Yeah.
But live music is not the reference with which you compare an audio system, because every live performance is going to be different. Even if you go see the same band in 3 different locations, it's going to be 100%. Different. And depending on where you sit, it's going to be different. So you have to have those recordings that you understand to the nth degree so you can compare that in the car. But and at the same time, some people say, well, live music has to be a reference. Well, I've got 5 different snare drums. They all sound different, and I can tune them differently, sound different than each other again. I've got multiple different cymbals, and they all sound a little different. Which one's the reference? None of them. Your reference is the recording on a good home or studio system, and that's what you use to compare your car to. But go listen to live music, because you need to know what the instruments sound like live so you can kind of correlate that. And the demo I do in the class is to say, okay, you've heard these recordings. Have you ever heard a snare drum in a recording sound like this snare drum? And I've never heard any recording reproduced on any system that has the attack properties and the snap and the decay of an instrument live right up close. Just can't get it. Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. Speakers can't do it. The recording can capture it a lot of times if you have a wide enough dynamic range recording, but even that's kind of tough.
I think we should say live in a good venue, because some venues, if you're in a stadium, like you can't even hear what people are even saying. It's god awful. Yeah.
Well, yeah. When you're turning around and amplifying
maybe an intimate
humongous
venue
arrays,
very well.
And that's I tell people all the time: go to a high school or a community college symphonic performance, because they're free. You get in for free, and you hear the instruments, and you hear the squeaks and the drop drumsticks, and you hear all that stuff going on. It's a real life thing, and close your eyes. When you're going to listen to live music, close your eyes and listen for every part of what's going on. Because once you experience some of that stuff live, a symphonic performance, you got the percussion all against the back wall. You got the flutes upright on the front side, and the clarinets up on the left up front. And trombones are halfway back, and trumpets are on the other side. And you can identify where all those things are, and it makes it a lot easier to see that stuff visually, and then pull out your reference music and close your eyes when you're listening to the reference music and identify all those pieces again. They might be in slightly different places, but it makes it easier to recognize where they are. That's something else let's bring up real quick. Close your eyes. Absolutely close your eyes when you're listening to the reference system or car audio system. A trick I use that I was taught. Qualifier.
Not if you're driving.
Car stop in the driveway, driving. In your garage.
Leave your eyes
off.
open if you're driving and listening.
Maybe turn out the lights.
Turn out. Yeah, and you can do that if you want to.
A little bit.
But and I'll shake my head just to shake out the visuals, because if you have visuals, and even when you close your eyes, if there was something out in front of the car, that's still in your visual memory. Shake it out and then listen for, let's say, the center image before you open your eyes. point, because you can point to right where you're hearing it from, and then open your eyes and look at where you're pointing and see if you can see where it's at. Listen for how far away it seems to be, then open your eyes and see where it seems to be. That's learning to listen is a whole different ballgame.
I was doing the pointy thing today, and it was surprising to me. When you close your eyes and you have this kind of vision in your head of how big the vehicle you're in is,
okay,
and then you play some tracks, and I was
Right.
experimenting with the Emma CD today, or download version, and playing the left center right center tracks, and I was having an issue with the
Right.
vehicle, and I'm just gonna point and then see where I'm pointing.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I was not pointing where I thought I was pointing, which was a very good exercise. And it was really strange to me to in my mind, I'm pointing to the right pillar,
Right.
and I open my eyes,
Right.
and I'm pointing 10 inches to the left of the pillar.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize it when my eyes were
Well,
shut.
Here's
And
one
it
for
was
you.
like,
Back
oh, okay, maybe I'm not.
when I
Maybe
was,
it's
first
not as
starting to
off as I
learn
thought it was. Type of
how to
scenario,
listen
but it's a really
the
good
Forerunner,
exercise.
and I'd get to a point where I was so frustrated I couldn't figure out where the center image was. And finally I just said, okay, Linda, my wife Linda, I said, just get in here, listen to this, and tell me where you hear Claire Marlowe. Where is she? Because and she listens for about 30 seconds and goes, well, part over's over here, and then there's another part over here, and there's another part down there. And it's like,
Oh, geez.
okay, just get out of the car.
Yeah, leave.
But she was right. Sometimes
That's
you
not
got to
good.
get another set of ears in there
Yeah.
to help you decorrelate what you're locked into. And listening fatigue is a huge factor. Huge factor.
Yeah, that's what I try and do every time I tune a car. I try and get every single person in the shop,
Yeah.
in the car, 6 different people.
Mhm.
And the good thing about that, it also teaches them how to listen to a car,
Right.
Because they might be people, who are just basic installers, but it's kind of giving them a critical listening ear, and it's giving them a reference
Mhm.
so they can, help you on the next car and the next car and the next car. And then you can even ask them, hey, where does this stack up to other cars that you've heard, and things like that. So people in shops, you can really use that to your advantage of getting as many people to listen to it as you can. Even, with me, I get some of the sales girls up front to come back and listen,
Right.
because it just gives you a whole different perspective.
Yeah.
Because again, it is kind of tough sometimes when you're listening to a car at maybe high volumes for 4 hours. Your hearing's kind of fucked at that
Yeah,
point.
you got
So
listening fatigue big
maybe-
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
We get to ask Mark your question, Matt, which is Matt likes to ask the question: when you're sitting in a car and you're evaluating a stereo system, do you point your head straight forward, or do
I
you
give
turn it slightly towards center
the system the benefit of the
when you're
doubt,
evaluating a system?
as long as I don't have to sit uncomfortably some way. I will adjust my head front to back a couple inches, left and right maybe an inch, and I'll shake my head out, and then I will just sit there, and normally I'm pointed straight forward, but if it sounds a little better, turning a little bit to the center, because if I'm listening to the center image, I'm going to turn and kind of look at the center image anyway.
Right, because it's kind of tough, right? Because
Yeah.
you're predicated on listening to a natural stage,
Right.
So if you're in an audience and you're to the left,
Yeah, you're not looking
naturally
straight
gonna
ahead.
look
You're looking at the
center.
conductor.
You're not looking exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So this was kind of a topic we've had on a previous podcast, because it does kind of make a difference, obviously, with mic arrays and single mic,
Mhm.
array mic, of exactly moving your head like that. It's going to make a lot of a difference. So,
And you have to think also, and we talked about this in the class, when you're doing timing measurements with the analyzer, you have to use a single mic.
Mhm.
Okay. Or you can use 2 mics, but you have to correlate the measurements for each one. So if you're putting that microphone at the center of the listener's head, and you're going to adjust timing from the left and timing from the right, when the listener gets in there, his ear's listening to the left speaker and his right ear's listening to the right speaker, your timing references are going to be off. What you measured is not what you hear. It's off by an inch or 2 inches or 3 inches. Okay. So even with Max, even with most analyzing systems, 9 out of 10 vehicles I get into, after the analyzer is done, the center image is not centered.
And even when you do that with Max and you're evaluating phase and adding a wrap if you need to, are you making up for that strictly with level, or will you go back in and touch delay?
Well, it's both, because you have to look at the closer you are to a speaker, the louder it is. Okay, so if you're let's say 1 meter from the left speaker and 2 meters from the right speaker, and they are tuned to reproduce sound at the same, the level going to the speakers is the same, the left speaker is going to sound 6 decibels louder than the right speaker.
Correct,
because
yeah.
it's twice as far away. Okay, but
if you've RTA'd to the same target,
it should be close.
Theoretically, be at the same level.
And
then the only thing at that point would be reflections.
Well, no, not necessarily. If that timing mic being in the center of your head, if you could put your timing mics where your ears would be, instead of at the center of your head, you would have a better reference for the arrival time. But what you can do, and this works in almost every car geometrically, you take that center mic, instead of putting it at the center of your head, move it to the right about 1 inch. Your timing measurements will be a whole lot closer. It's all geometry. You have to draw it out. I can't explain it here. I'm not even going to try. I see Gary thinking now.
Hold on. I'm drawing,
we drew it out in the class, and I draw it out in the class when I teach it. And Chris Lewis actually, the 2 days after, was sending me all kinds of pictures, because he had gone back and done all his measurements, and he correlated everything I'd said.
Yeah.
He said that's absolutely right.
Yeah, I'm looking at on paper right now. You're right. To the right, a tad.
Yeah. But that being said,
that
being said, reflections can still cause the image to sound like it's to the near side or to the far side.
Right.
Right, so again, you have to listen after you do the analyzer too. You have to put your ears on it, and you have to listen to what sounds right and what doesn't sound right. Yeah, little fun factoid for all you analyzer users out there doing timing measurements.
So we're
sorry. I was gonna say we got to get Max on, or Matt on the JL Max. Kick.
Yeah, I need to order one.
Yeah, what are you using now?
So we use REW.
Okay.
We use a lot of the same stuff that a lot of other people.
Yeah, it's the same stuff that Max does. The nice thing about Max, it takes what Smart does and what REW does, and even what TEF did years and years ago, and it just puts it on a table that's easier to eat from, if you will. It's easier to choose what you want to work with, and to get the results refined a lot faster. So it's
we already do a ton of VXI
right
at the shop.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, the integration of the VXI is insane.
And that's if you do VXI,
it's ridiculous.
There is no reason to not have a Max, because it integrates so well, and it makes your job that much easier, and you just fly through the tuning, and you get to the tuning by ear.
Texting Manville in the morning.
Yeah. Well, good luck getting one, because they're back ordered like crazy, and I think they're getting a bunch of them in November. I don't know if they're all spoken for, but it's worth putting one on order. Absolutely. So, in fact, funny story, just before I was doing an advanced tuning class last year, and guys that had all been to the class before as a prerequisite to have attended the class before, and this was going to be just on tuning. We weren't going to do all the laws of physics stuff. This is just on tuning. And I told Manville, I said, man, I just bought new software for my TEF. I haven't used it in a number of years, but I'm going to use it now. He said, oh, man, you shouldn't have done that. And I was like, why? I said, because there's better stuff out there. So he didn't say anything what it was. So I talked to him the next week. He said, okay, I'm going to buy Smart. I've looked at it, and I can't afford Ezra, but I can afford Smart. He said, don't buy Smart. We have something coming. And that's when they sent me the Max system. So I bought brand new software to upgrade my TEF, and I haven't even installed that software yet, because once I got Max, I don't need it.
We had Manville on
like the week before,
weeks?
Yeah,
2 weeks
right
before they announced
released,
it. He's
yeah.
like, I can't say anything, but there's something coming.
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of manufacturers working on something similar at this point. They're all trying to do the same thing, and I can't blame them. Jails just happened to be the first one to come out with it, and they got it going. So.
It works good. I actually, Matt, I was so proud that we have gone, I want to say we're 3 years without doing a system that didn't have DSP.
Wow.
Every single
Good.
car has had a DSP.
Good.
Yeah.
And we did a rework today on a Tundra that did not have a DSP. It had some install issues we fixed, changed the way some amps were set up, and it had an Alpine Halo radio in it. And it was the first time in a long time I actually used all the tuning capability built into the head unit. And I tuned it using Max.
Right.
And with the head unit, I'm like, this is the most overkill tune for like a system of this caliber that's ever happened.
Right.
But it was,
well,
it was not a replacement for having a real DSP,
Yep.
but it was better than having nothing.
Well, and I'll tell you what, Max is getting used. It gets used in boats. Scott Owen, Scott built Alma's Bronco.
Oh,
Yeah. When we were at Knowledge Fest, he came over and we explained Max to him, and I think he bought a Max to tune motorcycles with. It's and I'm going to take mine. I run sound at my church. I run all the tech stuff at my church, and haven't done it yet. But yeah, this winter when things slow down, I'm going to take Max to church and go through the whole system and dial that in a little
Let's
better.
go.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Taking Max to church.
Yep.
Can you get extensions for the microphones, and you can actually go?
Yeah, they have extensions.
Bigger.
Yeah, if I need a mic array that's 30 feet across, I can do that.
So what pew are you tuning to?
Yeah, well, we're going way off tangent here, but now the system in our church now, I redesigned it when COVID hit. We had to broadcast online because we couldn't have in-service church. So the point and shoot speakers we had that just kind of sprayed sound all over the sanctuary that reflected off all the walls. It was great live, but for a broadcast, it was awful, just terrible. So we had to minimize that, redesign the system. And if you want to learn about how arrays work, look at the Rinkus-Hines array systems. That's what we're using in the church. We've got arrays, left and right speakers. It's 8-inch mid-range drivers stacked vertically, and 24 compression drivers. And each one is on its own amplifier, its own delay, its own signal processor. Rinkus-Hines has to come in to tune it, but the way it's set up, the speakers might be 10 feet from the front row, but they're 100 feet from the back row. And it steers different lobes at different elevations, so the people in the back row get the exact same sound as the people in the front row. It's unbelievable, and you stand up. If you get 2 feet above the heads of the people in the back row, the sound is gone because it's steered that tightly that it doesn't bounce off the walls. Everybody gets basically the same sound. It's just the coolest thing ever.
It's probably the world's best sounding church.
No, there are others that are better than this one, but this one's pretty good for what we need. So,
what reference church have you been to?
no,
I'm kidding.
Hey,
Okay.
Don't ask him. He has an answer.
St.
by
Patrick's
the way.
Cathedral. St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. And reason being, we were there in '97 visiting friends, and our oldest daughter, Robin, was 6 months old. We had her in the stroller. And we just cruised into the church because they had it's just an architectural wonder.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy.
Again, going back to the Egyptians and going back to people who built that church.
Yeah.
We went to Notre Dame, and we were lucky to go there they had Mass on a Sunday, and the acoustics in that place were unbelievable. And it was like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
To hear the acoustics
of a big, highly reflective environment like that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. But St. Patrick's, we walked in, and we're walking down the center aisle, and all of a sudden, it felt like an earthquake. And I smiled, and Linda freaked out because she grew up in California. She was running for a doorway to get under the doorway.
Yeah, she thought there was an earthquake.
With Robin in the stroller, and it was their organ hitting 4 hertz. 4 hertz. And it does it about every 15, 16 minutes. I don't remember what it is. But, a pipe organ with tubes that are 3.5 feet around and 60 feet tall. Unbelievable. So yeah, that was the coolest thing I ever heard in church.
So what's the best sounding venue that you've ever been to?
Oh,
Let's say for a concert, the best sounding
oh, for
venue
a
you've ever.
concert. I was going to
Yeah,
say
for a concert
yeah,
you've ever been to.
I've been to a bunch of recording studios. You know, probably the Meyerson in Dallas, and I haven't spent a whole lot of time there, but amazing, well-designed acoustic environment. A lot of classical recordings have been done at the Meyerson. Um, I want to go to Bass Hall in Fort Worth because I've heard it's even better than the Meyerson. There's you know stuff in Nashville, there's stuff in California. As far as big environments like that, yeah, that would probably be it. You know.
And what's the most entertaining concert you've ever attended? Like they just put on an
Um,
amazing show.
oh God. Okay. I got to give you a couple of them here. All right.
Yeah.
Um,
Who's your one seed?
my one C that I have to see as many times as I can. He passed
Yeah.
away in 1990. It was Stevie Ray Vaughan. But I saw him 14
Yeah.
times prior to that. So, I was very lucky. The first time I saw Stevie Ray was in Houston, and it was February of '81. It was colder than snot. And buddy of mine, Dick Silver, said, "Man, we got to go see. You got to see this guy, Stevie Ray Vaughan. He's amazing." I was like, "What does he play?" He said, "Oh, he plays blues and guitar." I was like, "Nah, I don't think so." He said, "Well, Lindsay Whitaker's going to be there." I was like, "Okay, I'm going." It's this girl that I wanted to meet at the time. And we got there, and as soon as Stevie Ray and Double Trouble started playing, changed my life as far as music. There are several key concerts. That one changed the focus of what I enjoyed in music. And the very first concert I ever went to in 1977 in Houston in September was Kiss. It was Kiss on their Live Alive tour. And Kiss was great, but the band that opened for them was Styx. Okay, never heard who they were, and we're like, yeah, we got to sit through this opening band, whatever. And they came out, and it was the Grand Illusion tour, and we sat there for an hour and a half. And 6 months later, Kiss was just like not even on the radar, and it was ELP and Led Zeppelin and the Who and Styx and all the progressive bands from back then. Totally. And now I'm good friends with all the guys in Styx and the crew and stuff. It's just another one of those full circle things. And U2, 1990, was it? No. It was 1982, in Austin at the Meadows. I was working at a summer camp, and that disc War came out, and went down to see them in an amphitheater south of Austin. And U2 is a great band, amazing band to begin with, but just the feeling, the emotional content at that concert. And Bono was singing, and then he crawled up on top of the speakers like 30 feet up in the air, and he's standing up there and he's like, "Edge, how do I get down from here?" He had crawled up the rafters and he couldn't get down. They had to get a ladder. And then it was the War tour, so he had one of those white flags. He's carrying it around on the stage, waving it, and he handed it to the crowd, and the crowd started passing it around, and they're singing, and then a couple guys in the crowd start fighting over the white flag. Okay, what's a white flag? Don't fight. Okay, So Bono just goes, "All right, stop," and stops the band and just says, "White flag, don't fight over it, stupid." And then they started playing again. The crowd's like, "Oh yeah, okay," Just, those are the kinds of things for me with a live performance, which is why I say go listen to live music.
That's cool.
At the Houston Music Hall in Stevie Ray Vaughan again, it was Johnny Copeland, Room Full of Blues, Fabulous Thunderbirds, and then Stevie Ray, and it was New Year's Eve. And Johnny Copeland came out the first one, and this was when everybody heard of Stevie Ray, and they're just going to see him. And Copeland played about 3 songs and then broke a string on his guitar in the middle of a song, never stopped playing. His guitar tech came out, helped him change the string while he was playing the guitar, never stopped, got it retuned, and kept on going. And the crowd never even cared. There were, 4,000 or 5,000 people there. End of that song, he looked out at the crowd, flipped off everybody, and walked off the stage because nobody was listening to him.
That's baller.
Yeah. So he was pissed. Anyway, Roomful of Blues, Fabulous Thunderbird came out, and then Stevie Ray came out. And at the end of Stevie Ray's set, he brought Jimmy, his brother, out. He brought Johnny Copeland out, and they jammed one song for almost an hour. And everybody had left except maybe 150 of us. And we all walked down to the front and watched that.
That's awesome. That is amazing.
That if I have to choose one live music performance, emotional experience, that probably was it. And the picture I have up on my wall of Stevie Ray playing with him and Tommy Shannon was from that concert. I took my camera and got a good picture of those guys.
I wish I could have seen him play.
Yeah, he was unlike anybody else. He could play blues like nobody else. I mean, Eric Clapton said it best. The night Stevie Ray Vaughan died, he said there was nobody even close to play the blues like Stevie Ray did.
Yeah, the most comparable, and you're gonna laugh, the most comparable concert that I've attended to a Stevie Ray concert would have been a John Mayer concert.
Yeah, there you go.
But John Mayer was very influenced by Stevie Ray.
Right.
And when we went, John Mayer just fucking jammed for the whole concert.
Yeah.
He didn't play any hits. He didn't play Gravity.
Right.
He didn't play anything that he was known for.
Yeah.
He just jammed and blued out on the guitar for 2 hours, and it was amazing. Right? Everything he played, he would go on a 20-minute solo on the guitar, just, ripping the guitar. It was amazing.
Yeah. Kenny Wayne Shepherd does the same thing. Monty Montgomery, if you've never seen Monty Montgomery, check out Monty Montgomery. He plays an acoustic guitar like nobody else. Check out the Live at Daryl's House with Monty Montgomery. That was from his first season. It was a great one. So he pretty amazing guitarist.
So a good segue here.
Yeah.
Your other little business.
Oh, Artisan Customs.
Is amazing to see in person. Amazing to see in person. I've seen pictures for years, but it's the first time I got to see your handcrafted, just amazing chunks of wood that you turn into all sorts of stuff, from tables to drumstick holders and
it's Artisan Customs.
All sorts of
appreciate
stuff.
That. Yeah, that's what I do now. I don't do installs. I make stuff out of wood. I'm not going to crawl into the dash of a car anymore. I'd rather spend 4, 5, 6 hours taking a hunk of California redwood or something else and make a really cool piece that someone will enjoy, and inspire them to play their music better because of something like that. And so we make drumstick holders and guitar hangers and tables and little accessory pods and just all kinds of stuff out of pretty much any kind of wood you can come up with. Somebody comes up with a different idea for something, we'll make that too.
Yeah, lots. You ever think about hogging those out into a set of home speakers?
There's enough people doing that. That's there's enough guys making really cool, badass looking home speakers, and I probably will for myself at some point. But it's just not where I'm at right now.
Gotcha.
Like making stuff for musicians, inspire them to play music better so I can listen to it. What else, guys?
What else you got? Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's getting late for Matt. He's
Oh, okay.
He's only an hour past.
It's only 1:12.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's 12:12 here, so not a big deal. Yeah, trying to think of anything else.
I feel like the world knows you better, Mark.
Well, I appreciate that.
The world of car audio knows you better.
Well, the new world of car audio. Yeah, the new world of car audio. Yeah.
Well, even the old world to a point. I mean, you really get to.
No, all us old dudes know about Mark.
Yeah, but hearing the stories, like I remember when we had Fukuda on, right? I don't know how much feedback I got of people who've been around in the industry forever saying, dude, it was so great hearing a lot of those stories because I had no idea a lot of that stuff ever happened. So.
I got a Fukuda story for you. First time I ever met Mark is 92 in Dallas, and I wasn't competing yet in the summertime, but I drove over to Dallas to go to a show to see how it went, and didn't know who Mark was at the time. And I was just watching the judging, and I saw him and his judging partner there doing install. And he walked up to this one guy who had a little Blazer, mini Blazer with a sub box in the back. And, the guy did his presentation, said, yeah, sub box is mounted solid, yada, yada, yada. And Fukuda gets in the back and rips the sub box out. And then he went to another guy who said, yeah, man, my battery, I installed a second battery under the hood and it's in there tight and it's not going anywhere. He removed it, and I was like, oh my God, this is what they do in judging in Iasca, and that was another factor why my systems were installed the way they were, because I wasn't going to have somebody rip my sub box out of the back of my truck, not knowing that was just Mark and his way of doing it. And, if he's going to judge your vehicle, he's going to judge your vehicle. So, and that's why his vehicles looked as good as they did and they were as solid as they were, because he was going to treat his own vehicles the same way. My dog just
don't want to try to sneak something
he's just
past
a super guy. I've known him for a long time now, but yeah, he is an amazing person.
Well, I feel like it is time
yeah,
to
my
wrap
dog
up.
just
It's
walked
back
in to tell me it's
bed.
time for bed,
great.
so I got my dog down here. Yep.
Time.
All right, guys. You bet.
Well, we appreciate you spending some time with us, and one of these days we'll get
And
Matt out
how
there.
how
and
does
maybe I'll
everyone listening
come visit
from the tech side? How do they sign up for your training? Is there?
Find me. I mean,
Let's
I
plug
do.
that real quick.
I do most of my promo stuff on Facebook, so you can go just look for Mark Eldridge and for Mobile Soundstage Engineering on Facebook, and that just seems to be where people congregate more than any place else. I send out a flyer if you want it. You can give me a call, chat about it, talk about it if it makes sense. The class in December is full. I've got one scheduled middle of February, and it's about half full right now. So I've got another 10 seats or so left in there. Yeah, it's always a fun class. It's always the same curriculum, but we go off on different tangents. Every time I've taught this class, we go where the people in the class want to take it. If they want to cover a particular thing, we'll spend time there. So it's yes.
very very
just
organic.
like our podcast.
Yeah, there you go.
kind of like this
There you go.
podcast.
Yeah. Well, hey, if you guys want to do another one of these, an idea, get on 4 or 5 old dudes and talk about stories from the past. You could do that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do some group episodes.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah.
That'd be a new wrinkle.
Yeah.
To get just a couple of people on at the same time.
We have to get our recording setup dialed in for Expo for this year too, because that's another really good time when everybody's together. And unfortunately, it didn't quite work.
Well, let me know on
last
Expo
year,
too, because I'd love to come
hopefully
out.
this year we'll have our
if I can
mics
teach
set
something
up.
out there, that'd be great. But don't know if it'll happen. But let me know.
Yep.
For sure.
All right, guys.
Thank you very much for your time, Mark. And
I appreciate
really
it.
Appreciate it. And until
All
we
right.
talk next.
All right. Y'all be good. See ya.
See ya.
Bye.
And I